All right, Chris. This is a bit unusual, different type of interview that I'm used to giving, but I thank you for allowing this because I think that this is important. It's an aspect of a question that is troubling, perhaps to some, but it is a concern of mine, and that is the question of um, the continuation of the cultural heritage of it's really Americans in general, but in this case, particularly Puerto Ricans.
Mhm.
You've seen me struggle with this issue for many, many years. So, as president of the Bar Association in New York, president of the Puerto Rican Bar Association here in Florida, I've taken a lot of positions, both elected and appointed positions in politics, and always been the question of this representation of the culture and the Puerto Rican community. But the truth is that I'm not really Puerto Rican. I mean, I was born and raised in New York. I'm a Puerto Rican heritage, all
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But I never lived on the island.
Mhm.
And while I had become fluent in Spanish, it was a conscious choice to do so. It wasn't that I was fluent when I first came to Florida, for example. In fact, I was president of the Puerto Rican Bar in New York and didn't speak Spanish very little. It wasn't important in New York
Hold on.
because all
Sorry,
else.
sorry to cut.
Yeah.
Tony, your hand is blocking your
Okay.
face in the
Oh,
camera.
okay.
Okay.
So I'll just take it from where I was.
Yeah.
So it wasn't important because everybody in New York was in the same position. If you said you were Puerto Rican, you were one of the sharks in West Side Story. That's it,
Mhm.
and everybody else was a jet. So that was our thinking.
Mhm.
And then, of course, we were involved in the struggle for civil rights, which gave us some purpose
Mhm.
um, for development of your cultural heritage. But when I came here to Florida, I realized how far I had been disconnected from the actual culture of Puerto Rico. Because, of course, I didn't speak Spanish. And I didn't know about the Taino Indians. I knew about Algonquins because that's what they taught us in New York. I
Mhm.
knew about Peter Stuyvesant, mayor of Dutch New York, but I
Mhm.
didn't know anything about Munoz Marin, the first governor of Puerto Rico.
Mhm.
So I realized that I was, really in disconnect to the people that I was representing, and this, of course, became even exacerbated worse when I became an elected official, because my base was Puerto Rican, and
Mhm.
I know crap about Puerto Rico or Puerto Ricans.
Right.
So I repaired that by making it my business to learn Spanish, to learn about the history, to get involved with the issues of sovereignty, which is what has been perplexing Puerto Rico, which leads us to the problem of why we're having a convention in the first place,
Mhm.
because it's the powerlessness of
Mhm.
the people of Puerto Rico. They are
Mhm.
powerless. And so, as a lawyer and a constitutionalist, I don't like to see abuse in what's going on in Puerto Rico. Of course, nothing other than that.
Mhm.
But I also realize, Chris, that that's me. And while the island itself now has reduced its population from 3.5 to down to 3.1, and it's losing it. It's literally in a uh, terminal decline as far as population. If Puerto Rico is ever going to resolve its condition, and that means the condition is territorial status, so it has equal voice like all Americans, it's got to be those Puerto Ricans here on the mainland who will make that difference, who have that voice, who have congressmen, who have senators. But how long does it take with a point where you lose interest in the island?
Mhm.
Because, okay, I'm happen to get into it, but how many people just really listen? I was of Irish descent. My parents came here with the potato famine, but that was 100 years ago. I'm an American now. I'm more interested in the Patriots and the football game than I am in what's going on with Sean Fain. Whoa, um, and that it's understandable because that is actual the American experience. You move from the European, you come over here, wherever you came from, then you integrate, you become part of the system, and you forget about the home country. If that were to happen, I'm speculating, but if that were to happen to the Puerto Rican community, which is losing its population on the island, which is voiceless, and the only people that have some voice on the mainland and they don't care about it anymore because they're now Americans. They're from Texas. They care about how the Houston Cougars are playing, or
Right.
or the New York Jets are playing,
Mm-hmm.
or the Miami Dolphins are playing. That's what's important to me. Then does this mean that we're just like the Sisyphus of the Greek myths? You pushing a rock up the hill, only to fall down again. That
Mm-hmm.
we're in a useless battle that cannot be won. And so you and I have discussed this on several occasions, and you made an interesting comment to me the other day, precisely on your question of that. I heard you, I listened to you, but I don't know if I relate. So I wanted to for you to explain that to me, and then see whether or not I'm going the wrong way. What can I do, if anything, if necessary, to ignite that? Is it possible? That's the question.
So, and I hate to answer your question with a question. I'm also grateful that we want to have this conversation. So, thank you for taking the time to talk with me about it. I think it is relevant for what we're trying to accomplish. But I want to ask you all, how do you've heard the expression "all politics are local," right? How do you understand that phrase? What does that mean for you? All politics, and do you believe it's true? Or
Yeah. Well, to me, it means that people worry about what's going on, their bread and butter,
right,
their bottom line,
right,
right, happening next door. So I'm
right,
more concerned about who's picking up my garbage and whether they pick it up on time.
right.
Then I'm at esoteric question of equal rights for the penguins in Africa.
That's how I understand it as well.
Yeah.
So, meaning whatever happening, whatever touches and concerns my life now, it's most imminent. That's my politics. That's what I most care about. I think that's the fundamental question we're up against. And I'm listening to you, and I know your story, but I could think about it. What your own motivations for learning and appreciating the culture is connected to an election, right? I mean, wanting to lead not necessarily an election, but wanting to be a leader. So if your base, your constituency, who you were depending on for votes, or that was your motivation into it, and I just wonder, I wonder if that's what it would require for other people to really want to. Right? Do I want to have to want to seek office before I would really be that interested in it? I mean, I'm interested in it because it offends me. The Puerto Rican question of statehood offends me personally. It's offensive. I hate to see it. Hate to see them treated that way. I hate the fact that my heritage is treated as a second-class citizen of the country. That it bothers me. I also think it's one of those things that bothers me, but it also doesn't affect my life every day. And the coalitions I've been building over a lifetime, it doesn't affect their lives necessarily every day also. So, and we've brought people in, right? And how do I compel them? How do I make this question fascinating enough for them to work on it weekly, monthly, even, right? It's a challenge. And these are my best friends, people I've known my whole life, who actually do care about me and my interest. And we've taken the time to explain to them what the challenge is, right? It's odious for them too, but not odious enough for them to take, and it's not just them. I'm saying me, and I think the broader public. I'm more concerned right now with what kind of history my son's learning in school. He's my 10-year-old is learning in school, and technology is a constant assault on, or these constant incursions into our life, essentially. So that's the issues. That there's other issues that are touching concern in my life with more regularity, whereas this thing is a little esoteric. I was listening to your conversation with the gentleman just earlier, and you had said that this is a serious conference, and I get that, and but I would like to tease that a little bit and kind of interrogate a little bit. How do we know what a serious conference is? How do we distinguish what's happening next week that I'm very happy to help you with and contribute in some way? How do we distinguish it from some sort of an intellectual pageantry?
Okay,
right?
I think those are good questions. And let me give me first. I understand that everyone's immediate problem is food, right, and self shelter. That's got to be different. But once you pass that, and the reason why we're having this conferences with those who are lawyers, those that are professors, it is not meant for the guy who is struggling with unemployment. He's not struggling with Social Security. He's not struggling.
Right.
They don't have the time to worry about these topics. They're trying to worry about tomorrow, right? They're worrying whether they're hungry today and how they feed themselves for tomorrow.
Right.
This conference has to be directed at those who have already conquered that problem, right? And are now looking for the humanitarian problems. So those who worry about environmental, for example, they're not worried about eating tomorrow. They're worried about the long-term environmental problems. You're worried about Alaska and the the melting ice glades. Why are you worrying about the melting ice caps? Because it's going to have the long term, not because it's going to feed tomorrow. So you have to sort of think the pitch you're making is those people who are looking at the long term, right? And as opposed to people who are worried about the local immediacy.
How do you build a broad coalition? As I guess, but to actually make movement on an issue like this, you got to have a lot of buy-in from a lot of people across different spectrum.
And that's why one of the things I'm trying very hard to expand it beyond Puerto Rico. If you're only worrying about Puerto Ricans, a good portion of the Puerto Ricans just worrying about a day to day. Do I get my job? Am I going to get health benefits? I do not have medicine. Those people cannot help at least formulate the battle plan. They can be there for you, but they can't formulate the battle plan. It has to be directed at those who can have the time. So then you have to reach out to the altruistic, particularly since we have, if you heard me say, it can't be the Puerto Ricans who solve this problem because it's not a Puerto Rican problem, it's an American problem. So you have to talk to the altruistic American who truly believes America is great. And America is great because it's always invited migrants from every place, and they've become part of the American experience. And we do not have people who are in a second class position or second class citizenship. That has been, we started that way. Of course, we all know that this nation was founded with great documents, but at the guys who signed that Declaration of Independence and to sign the Constitution were slave owners, and women had no right to voice their opinion in those. So while we are a great nation, we didn't start that way, but it was aspirational.
Right.
It was an aspirational. So now we're progressing.
Flawed men said
Right.
made
So
such a great
if we
document.
appeal to the American who believes in that great American experiment, and we point out to them, in 1898, we were in that phase, America, that they wanted to expand, and we have what it was called Manifest Destiny. Go to your law book, or not your history book, and you'll find Manifest Destiny. Who was it now? What's about yellow journalism? These are actual things that happened in American history. And we, as a nation, decided that we had to join what Europe was doing, what the world was doing, the Russians. Everybody was colonizing somebody. So all of France and Spain and England, Russia, all of them were colonizing the rest of the world. That was the way it was done. And so the United States decided in 1898 we needed to get into this act. And we used the concept of Manifest Destiny, and we decided to take Spain out of the continent.
Remember the name.
Kicked them right out of them.
Remember the
and
name.
so we invaded, took them out, took the old man. Spain has been a decrepit power for some
Splendid
time.
little war, they call
and
it.
when the Spanish-American War came down, the problem is that may have been okay in 1898, but now it's 2023, and we still have 3.1 million Americans who can be sent to war, who have been sent to war, so that Iraqis have the right to vote, so that people in Afghanistan have the right to vote, and they can't vote.
Right.
I mean,
It's offensive.
there's a little.
Sure.
That's a nice word, but it sticks in your craw. It sticks in mine. And so, as an American, forget about being a Puerto Rican. As an American,
Right.
that's offensive. And I think that's how you have to appeal. You have to appeal to the American altruistic, not person who is not worried about feeding his face tomorrow. The person who has the time to think into deep questions. And when I say it's serious, the reason I said I ordered it so serious for this conference is because it is not just me mouthing off. All right, my opinion, your opinion, everybody's opinion. Oh, we're all going to talk to each other. We have thousands of those kind of things. We're going to have people who make a living researching these issues. All right, so hopefully those people will have thought through and there's statistical analysis to give us information so that we can make decisions based on facts.
Can I give you my response to that then?
Yeah.
my response to that is that these group of people that do this, the intellectual class, right, the serious people in the room who are going to talk about this stuff, they've been doing this. This is actually, in my opinion, what's got us to this frog in the pot scenario. So, meaning if this conference, if we can't actually pull results out of it or find a way to compel a choice or at least be able to determine what, as a group, we all decide is the way we should go. To me, then it actually is just another exercise. It's just another exercise of people talking. And by the way, it's the same people who've been in power this whole time. It's the same group of people who have been in positions of influence.
Well,
you know,
I'll push back on that, okay? Because it's not the same people. Because obviously these are current professors who are writing, and the lawyers are new people who are. So it's not the same old people. It's new people. And
Fair
secondly, all movements must start with someplace. Even the American Revolution, where they had the first shots in 1776, that wasn't the start of 1770. All the talk about taxation and was years in the planning until eventually they said, enough. And then you had Lexington and Concord. Somebody fired a shot, and bingo, the American Revolution was born. And they just said, I have read that actually less than 1/3 of the people in the United States at that time, the colonies, actually wanted independence. George Washington himself was not for independence. He was a loyalist until the very end. So it has to start someplace.
Sure.
And I suggest to you that we look at, has there ever been outside of Puerto Rico, because they have had lots of plebiscites in Puerto Rico. They plebiscites, what for? You guys don't have the power.
A plebiscite is a practice vote.
It's a vote. It's a referendum. So they have the referendum.
But do plebiscites have consequence?
No, that's the problem. They keep saying, well, if we win, we're going to go to Congress and then make the petition.
But then you have an entire group of people who are voting bloc on the most fundamental question of statehood or not for Puerto Rico,
right, that
actively obstruct and say, we're not going to participate in the vote in order to send the message that this is not a...
Right.
So they basically subvert democracy.
Right.
That's their position.
But let's
subvert
put it this
the whole process.
So if 100% of them said statehood or 100% said
it
independence,
would have no effect.
Has no effect.
Exactly.
So the only way to resolve this problem is a national platform where somehow there's a movement. Is it small? 170 people is not going to move the nation. But the National Rifle Association and the Christian Coalition, they have the conferences which bring thousands, didn't start with thousands. It has to start someplace.
So I agree. I mean, you're right. Of course, every movement has to start someplace. What I would submit to you is that the people coming in that room, they may be new people, but I imagine that they're just the kids of the former people who were there beforehand. That's really what we're looking at. They're not really. And the other thing, if you look at their motivations for why they're coming, it's worth asking, interrogating this stuff. A lot of them, to me, it's a status thing. It's if I go and I speak, I'm considered a professional, an expert. I don't know that the burning is in the belly, and I could be wrong. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'd love to see it. I want to see passion, because I also agree with you as far as that. The things we just talked about with the votes, to me, it's just indicative. They're examples of why you can't let them decide, so to speak. It's far too political. It's got to be up to us to decide over here. I believe that we're in sort of a frog in the pot scenario, is what I'm saying. If the truth of the matter is that, as you had said a few weeks ago, that we're the only ones in the nation really taking up this cause, really actually planning around it, organizing around, this question of statehood or the Puerto Rican diaspora or Puerto Rican culture, so to speak, we're up against some other major issues that are, out there in front of us. And we also have the distinct issue where Puerto Ricans, that of course, I'll share with the audience that I was the parliamentarian and one of the founders of the Puerto Rican parade here in Florida. And it's a great source of pride for me, but I've recently resigned. I don't know if you even know that. Are you aware I resigned?
You told me.
I have personal conflicts about it. So we want to assimilate. We say we're American, right? We are American, but we're constantly reminding everyone of our distinctness, how different we are, how, it's a tough thing to talk about. As a Puerto Rican, it's sacrilege to even challenge these things. I had a lot of pride being in the Puerto Rican parade as a kid in New York. I know you were in it as well, so I had that connection to it. But I tell you, as I've got older, I realized, man, it's kind of at conflict in a way. It does put me at conflict. We have meetings, it's Puerto Rico first. We have press conferences where with our partners from Channel 9, and I see they're doing it in Spanish, forgetting that we have American audience and we're in America. Those things I've never said publicly, but I love that. I have an issue with it.
Very, very good point that you point out. See, of course, Puerto Rico and Puerto Ricans on the island are very attached not only to the culture but to the language.
Sure.
So if you start having this conversation only in English, they're going to say, "Wait a minute, we're Puerto Rican. Let's speak in Spanish." So they want to have the conversation in Spanish, and they want to have the question of their nationhood, their sovereignty in Spanish, and they want to have it in Puerto Rico. And they actually have big debates, Christian, on the island. Who can vote on the sovereignty issue of these plebiscite? What about if you lived in New York? Well, should you have the right to vote or not vote? And I can't say I was fascinated by that because of course I was always be excluded because I was more. So there's no way that I could be included in this vote, even though I love Puerto Rico and care about it. No, I couldn't. But the interesting thing is that is very circular thinking. They don't have the right to influence anything other than moral influence. And the ones who can have the power is us, me. I have more power over the future of Puerto Rico than all those people living in Puerto Rico. You. In fact, Jeremy, our friend who's a part Korean, has more power over Puerto Rico than does the Puerto Ricans on the island. So what are they talking about? They're totally insolent in understanding addressing your question of the parade. The Puerto Rican parade is part of the culture. And so, since we're here and we want other people to join our culture, then we have to speak to them. If you're selling tacos, you want to speak to them in Spanish? You're going to speak to them in English because you want to buy your tacos. Mm-hmm. So
you want buying in our culture, then we should be,
you want to buy into my culture. I got to explain it to you. That maybe you'll learn you'll learn some words of Spanish, and before you know it, it expands. And I think that's my own solution, thinking that somehow if we reach out to the altruistic part of the American, they will buy into the argument that Puerto Rico needs to have equality, whether it's an independent nation to stand among all nations of the United Nations, or as a state like every other person, because that is what being American is.
I believe that's where it stops, though. They'll buy in. They'll say, yeah, I agree. But it doesn't fundamentally change their life if a Puerto Rican has less power than them. If Jeremy has more power than Puerto Rican and island, that seems to be an advantage and benefit for him, actually, and less of a reason to burn in his belly to get it changed. And that's what we're up against. If we're the only ones talking about this, we could be witnessing the death, actually, of the state of Puerto Rico as we know it, or the union or the territory of Puerto Rico as we know it.
And until this question is actually resolved, then I don't know whether or not this will survive this whole movement. Right. They may be to the point if we on the mainland don't care enough, we're not passionate enough, and the Puerto Ricans on the island are dying. Well, that's the way it's going to be forever.
By the way, so I'm pushing back, but I want you to know I still think there's value to it. It needs to be done. We need to ask it. We need to reach out and try to build a coalition around it, because it does. It's odious to me, and that is enough for me to say, okay, let's see if everybody else, if this bothers you too. And then I think the best we can do is hold a camera up to it, Dad, and stick, hold our friends accountable, our allies who do agree, who pitch it and say, yeah, no, you're right, that is. Well, then what are we going to do about it? And then what can we do? Or what do you want to do about it? That sort of thing. We just earnestly push them by continuing to organize. We follow up this event with a political sauce or something to now bring these people back to see if we've been able to fine tune the language or whatever.
I wish we had gone live on Facebook or something. We got a good consultation. I don't know if we could somehow put this on YouTube where people could comment after listening to this conversation, put it so that we could get some feedback.
Sure.
How people think one thing or another, what they think about it, because the future of Puerto Rico really depends on answering this question that we have just explored. Thanks.